Hello everybody, welcome to episode 47 of Get Out of Rap. I never thought there'd be 6 or 7, there's 47. And I am 47 on Sunday, so a bit of synergy there. I am joined by Sophia Jakeman and Helen Manahan. Helen making her 4th appearance now. Sophia, her first. Is it your first one on a podcast, Sophia?
I think it is, Martin, yeah.
It is, wow. It'll be the first of many. And it would be wrong, I think, to say Helen and Sophia are trainers at BPA, because that's too limiting. They are the beating brains, hearts and souls of so much of our great content. But we are here to talk about training, because it has been very, very busy in the world of our training and people wanting training from all across the globe. And we just wanted to explore why, what we've learned, and share that with you. If you're in your contact centre now and you've seen the same thing, maybe you can relate, or maybe you want to find out how training's being done, what kind of training is really out there at the moment in terms of people wanting it. We're seeing a big request for training in emotional intelligence and how to best deal with vulnerable customers. So I'm lucky to be joined by 2 experts to tell me and tell you all about it. So Helen and Sophia, thanks very much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Lovely to be here again.
Yeah, it's great to be here too, Martin, and many happy returns for Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I kind of earlier today, I was talking to Helen before we were recording, and I forgot what day it was and also how old I was. So I'm going to blame that on lockdown.
No change there then. Sorry, go ahead.
Go
I
on.
was just going to say, I was reflecting on you saying the beating brains, and I was thinking, yeah, there's lots of beating brains in training, isn't there? lots of brain beating goes on. That's the idea. Shake a few things loose. Anyway, sorry, riffing already.
See what comes out. Shake some neurons around. Sophia, maybe I can start with you then. How is training different, let's say, as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I think it certainly is different. I think, obviously it's been terrible. The pandemic has been terrible, but for the impact on training has been very exciting. So how we sit those things side by side, I think it is exciting times. I think that it's certainly temporarily been transformational for the training business. Whether it will be long term is a case of watch and wait and see, but it's a very interesting question for all of us that are in the business. I think it's created real opportunities across contact centres to be able to deliver more cost-effective training. We're not seeing this, obviously we're living in a virtual world, so there's not the travel and time taken out in the same way. We're allowing dispersed teams to come together and work for the first time. We know that there are people that who would never normally come together and work together, are coming together now, sharing a common experience, being able to come face to face with each other in breakout rooms. This is great for team working, great for that sense of having an online community. So really exciting the way that we're able to get people together to work on training, and we can work in more bite-sized ways. So we can do a little and often because the virtual world, online learning allows us to do that. So yeah, really exciting times.
Do you think that in the same way that people have been challenged in the contact centre world around home working, and also the flexible nature of saying, you know what, to start with, we're going to have to accept that our workforce might not all be able to start their shift at the same time. There's some more flexibility there. And that in that's opened up this maybe appetite now for using this time for kind of bite-sized virtual training.
Yeah,
yeah.
so go ahead,
Yeah,
Sophia.
no, please go.
I was just going to say, I think that to Sophia's point about it being exciting, it really is. And I definitely think that before there wasn't an appetite for that so much. And what the pandemic has done, along with all of its many kind of, well, huge negative impacts, is it has changed a lot of mindsets really around the ways that we can deliver training. And we flexed internally and quite successfully pivoted from purely classroom based activity to now, as Sophia mentioned, meeting online, creating those connections, and doing it in ways that are more operationally viable and actually much more palatable. So a long answer to a short question is yes, it's been very successful, and I can see it continuing, at least in a blended approach, or at least in terms of our offering.
Does that mean, Helen, that you've had to think about how the content is shared? How's that kind of manifested itself?
Sure. So I mean, dependent on what topic you're going to be exploring in a training workshop, the topics are the same, but the ways that you facilitate the learning, definitely, I think Sophia will agree, look and feel a bit different in the online environment, if you want to say. So yeah, so we've had to come up with some more agile ways to kind of get messages across and make sure that that people are kind of absorbing and reflecting in the same way. Sophia mentioned breakout rooms, which it's not exactly like a whiz bang piece of technology. It's basically just making sure that participants in a larger session can have those kind of more intimate times within a training kind of environment where they can have some more well, richer discussions and then come back for plenary. So yes, the methodologies have been tweaked, but essentially the main thing is still human connection, and we can do that, we've realized, online just as well, just as well virtually as you can face to face, and there are benefits as well. So I'm not saying I don't miss bricks and mortar training, because I do, but definitely I've become a bit of an advocate for online sessions now too.
And I think if we keep the human connection at the heart of the training we're delivering, when we're putting it together, when we're piecing it together and we're delivering it, we want to make sure that there's no opportunity for people to be passive in their learning. So having the screen between them, between you and I, means that we still want to be active learners. So we have a duty as trainers and to make sure that we are, perhaps even more than we might have done, involving the learners at every stage. The idea that we're leaning in almost physically as well to the screen, leaning into our learning. And we have to be very creative and make sure that we are stimulating, engaging at every point, because we recognise that can be a barrier.
That's really interesting. How do you, even maybe at the start of the session then, so if it was bricks and Mortimer, if it was,
that would be great.
Yeah, Bricks and Mortimer, it's a new sitcom. You're in a class or you're in a room and people are coming in, and you can engage with them and sense their body language and do that, maybe a mindfulness minute or whatever it is, to bring them there. How have you had to adapt to do that virtually at the start of your sessions?
Yeah, I mean, I could mention, Helen, I'm thinking about our temperature check. We often do. So one of the things we would do physically, we want to see everybody. Screens are on. We get people to come on mic, but also use the chat facility. And even as people join, we might do a temperature check. So if one is, got up on the wrong side of bed, really very low energy, or got an awful lot on my mind, wish I wasn't here for training, and 10 is raring and ready to go, where are you on that? And there's no judgment, and recognizing, so how ready are we for our learning, depending on what else is going on. So we recognize that we all have a lot going on for ourselves at the moment. So just checking in. So it's a bit of a self-awareness piece. And what would I need to do to move myself up that score if I wanted to get closer to 10 and further away from 1 in terms of how I'm feeling? So chance to share if people want to. But just recognizing that we are all at different places. So we would do that temperature check, can be really quite useful. But really, any exercises we can do to get everybody speaking as soon as possible is part of the engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, and that temperature check that you're talking about there, Sophia, what we tend to do if we're doing a workshop, you know, over a series of modules, that can become quite a powerful tool actually over the course of over the course of the course, as it were, dependent on what it is that we're that the training's about. And we find that participants, you know, the first time they might not want to share, which is fine, but by the end of it, they're coming in and they've got that kind of almost like emotional shorthand for, you know, I'm at a 5 and this is why, and they feel quite happy to share that. And you can use it throughout the session. You can use it at the beginning, at the end, if you're looking, you know, attitudinally about how people are feeling, how open and receptive they are in that moment to exploring new ideas and learning things and taking things on board. Yeah, so it's really powerful. And that's a good one. And then never underestimate the power of a good old icebreaker. What I've loved learning is, since we've been, to Sophia's earlier point, we've got a bit more of a global reach since the pandemic started. The icebreakers that work in various parts of the globe do differ, and I find that endlessly fascinating. Just as an example, if you're wondering, American crowd always start with tell us your name and your first car, and maybe even a fun fact about your first car, so make, model, and what it meant to you. And they fly with it. It's brilliant. I love it.
What were that? Well, now we've got our answer. Surely, what was yours?
Well, what about my first car?
Yeah.
Well, because I'm British, well, I always position it as because I'm British, I don't drive. So my first car was basically my dad's Beetle. So if anyone's old enough to remember Herbie, the movie, it was a powder blue Beetle. So I guess that was my first car, really. But I don't drive.
I'm taking the training now. Sophia?
Oh, well, I'm only showing my age here. I had a black Allegro.
Austin Allegro.
Austin Allegro, or all aggro, as people called them, with a black vinyl roof and little sports lights. Yeah.
I had a car that cost about £100, had no radio, had a hole. It was a Polo, had a hole in the floor of the passenger side.
Was it a Flintstones car? Did it have a hole?
My favourite fact, or the fun fact about this car was, if you did a sharp right turn, it beeped the horn. And I lived in a part of the world at the time where there were some dubious characters, local characters, that used to hang out on a street corner. And every time I went to work or in the morning, I would turn right to go past them and beat the horn at them. And these weren't the type of guys that I wanted to draw attention to myself, let's say. So I had to think of a different way to go to work that meant I didn't turn sharp right past them.
There's a whole In Betweeners episode in there somewhere.
Definitely. I mean, that's that. Any other icebreakers at work?
There's tons. I mean, and it depends.
Your favourites then, maybe?
Well, I think it depends as well. I mean, we do work with internal teams and other teams that we've worked with, you know, more than once. We've got those established relationships. So I think whether it's going to be quite benign and saccharine, or whether it's going to be something a bit more meaty, depends on the dynamic that's at play within the group. Yeah, sorry, Sophia, I'll let you.
Some of them, I think we can have some quick ones if we're working in a bite-sized way with people, but have delivered training over 2 days. So 2-day workshops, for example, and at that point we really want to get to know each other at the beginning, because we're going to be working quite intimately together over those 2 days. So we've got a draw your life activity, which works really well, and people just pop it up on the whiteboard or share it, where we get people to think about, you know, what's been most, you know, what's had a, you know, it might be a chronological look at their life, but also what interests them, what values they work towards, but not using any words, so pictorially. And that can be really good at the beginning. We could just post those up as well, and people get a real feel for each other at the beginning, and we can reference them as we go. We've got a point of reference to book some things on as well, so that can tell us quite a lot. Icebreakers from the trainer point of view are really good if they also give us some information that can help us then frame the learning over the 2 days, so we can understand our participants, particularly as many we've never met before.
Yeah, and that is such a good point, that even something as kind of, innocent as an icebreaker activity, we do tend to find that you can really, that can then become a thread that gets woven through the course of the training, and you always find links back to it and a bit of synergy there. So yeah, it can be really helpful.
I love that, Draw Your Life. I seem to remember you a couple of years ago, Helen. That's the first time I was exposed to something like that, and it definitely worked. Definitely.
Yeah. It's really, it's sometimes the most simple things that have the most impact, right?
Definitely. This is a slight tangent, but you guys, I definitely wanted to ask you about this, especially given your experiences over the last year. Like a lot of people, we're homeschooling, and the girls 12, 13 and 14, brilliant, really adapted well. No complaints. But something that fascinates me, and I'd love to pick your brains on it, get your views, is both all of the three of them and none of their classmates, and I saw a funny TikTok about it actually, from a teacher's point of view, none of them turned their cameras on. The TikTok was the teacher saying, "Hi class, welcome," and then it went, "Hello darkness, my old friend," and it's just a screenshot of all of their cameras turned off. Why do you think that is?
It's death really to a training environment, I think, when you're just talking to some black postage stamps. Sorry, Sophia, I don't know, I'm sure you've got thoughts on it as well. We speak at length, as you can imagine, about why it might be, but we do everything we can to encourage people to engage with a camera. You wouldn't go to a training room with a bag on your head.
No.
So, but it's an interesting point culturally, isn't it? And we're very much at the new frontier of what good etiquette, and if it's etiquette or whether it's a well-being thing, that's the thing we have to recognize, that in the pandemic, potentially forcing people who aren't really feeling, for whatever reason, like they can be on screen to do so, might not be beneficial for them in other ways. So sorry, I'm just riffing here. Sophia, you might have something more coherent to say on the matter.
No, I think something about there may be people's circumstances that make it more difficult, and that's why practical things like having screen backgrounds that you can put on if you don't want people to see your background. But I think the biggest difference, as you say, Helen, you come into a training room, you don't have a bag over your head, but when you come into a training room, you wouldn't see yourself. And I think for a lot of people, it's the subconsciousness of seeing themselves that we want to get over. And how we get that. So I'm on Zoom with you now, but I've hidden myself. I'm able to do that. I hide my self view. So for lots of people, it can feel quite distracting. So we need to find ways to help people overcome that, and also get people out of the habit. And this is where being active, I'm all in favour of cameras on, because I think it helps with the active learning. Because when we know psychologically, when we know that we can't be seen, we might be more likely then to engage in other activities, which might dilute our learning. So no one can see me, so I might just do this email here or do something else there or check something on my phone. So I think there's something when we show up physically and we can be seen, then we're possibly, even if it's unconsciously, we are more actively engaged in our learning. But this issue about self-consciousness probably is something that we need to find ways that we can do it on Teams where you can hide your self view whilst others can see you, would be great.
Yeah. Or just enter as a cat.
Yeah, totally. Have a filter. Yeah. Choose your own avatar, put your own adventure. No, there is something, you're right. You wouldn't sit and stare at yourself in a mirror or have a mirror there all day, would you? And it is quite, as a human, definitely not beneficial, I wouldn't imagine.
So let's talk now about the topic. So from the menu of courses that we offer, you guys write and deliver. What's been the fans' favourites? What have been the ones that you've kind of, over the course of this pandemic, both here and in the US, been the ones that have gone, you know what, there's people saying, we really want to train our guys on this. What's the topic that's number one?
I think that the first thing I would say is that it's the bespoke ones that maybe speaking for, I hope I'm speaking for both of us here, that we're both most proud of and that seem to have real impact. So when we design a training program to meet a specific contact center or client specific needs for, you know, express customer needs, those are the most satisfying and where we can see real impact. And we've seen some real tangible, you know, measurable impacts on KPIs, and also, you know, participant feedback, which is great, but it can only be measured on successful, you know, outcomes, right? It's not just, oh yeah, we all had a good time. But I'll let Sophia speak about it. But the one that I see having huge resonances, and it sounds really kind of like grandiose, but around the globe at the moment, is the response to how do you deliver an empathetic response to vulnerable customers? How do you identify vulnerability? And I'll let our subject matter expert chime in on that now.
Yeah. And I was going to, I mean, I would echo what you've said there, Helen. Anything that relates to answer the question directly, Martin, anything that relates to the human element, the relating skills is going to be top of the agenda. We're all human beings, aren't we? Having a collective shared experience, and the challenges of that. So the human element, human connection is more important than ever. Vulnerability, as Helen mentioned, so the idea being that we would always want to consider, we have a duty of care to our more vulnerable of customers. That we mean those customers who are less likely to be able to navigate our services or products themselves, who might be more likely to suffer detriment because of a vulnerability that they might have, should have always been important to businesses that care. However, now we recognise that all of us can have been vulnerable at some time. So vulnerability is widespread. So we're living with this sort of backdrop of uncertainty, of people feeling not in control. So people having reduced circumstances as a result of the pandemic, whether that be, you know, financially, people experiencing loss, just emotional, you know, psychological effects of isolation. All of that's in the mix. And we're thinking, so all our contact center agents, we're humans ourselves, having that human experience, feeling vulnerable, whilst recognizing more and more customers are feeling vulnerable and unsure. So it's top of the agenda. Yeah.
That always used to be one when I was leading operations, or even on the phones myself, and being around other people. You know, I was young then, and it seemed like it was a bit of a lottery around empathy, because you were dealing with customers who either situationally were vulnerable, or the vulnerable aspect of their life was a big part of their life that they'd lived with for a long time. And seeing how it was just a lottery of how those customers were dealt with, because at that time, 20 odd years ago, we certainly were not trained on using emotional intelligence and dealing with vulnerable customers. How would you kind of answer? I'm not expecting you to kind of like crystallize all of the great content, but how would you answer that question around how do you take, let's be honest, frontline advisors still 60-70% of them it's still one of their first jobs, maybe they're of a certain age. How does the training help those people better interact with customers that are vulnerable, where maybe they haven't got processes to help identify, and they just have to deal with it as the customer comes in? Have I made sense there? I'm not sure I have.
You certainly have. I think it's a really interesting question, and you mentioned age in there, but I think age and stage come into play here, Martin, when we're talking about vulnerability. And we recognise that what we talk about with vulnerable customer trainers, we want to get to a point where everybody in the organisation, everyone in the contact centre is championing vulnerability. That it doesn't matter who you get on the call, as you say, this idea of a lottery, the days of it being a lottery should be behind us. You know, we have this duty of care, and also from a business perspective, a vulnerable customer is as likely or more likely, research suggests, to be a loyal customer if we treat them in the right way. We know we can trust this company. I've come to the right place. and therefore are more likely to stay, more likely to be, you know, customer advocates for us in the future. So it really makes good sense. And I think that some people, depending on our frame of reference, it's a mindset thing, some of it, but it's also a skill set. So we want to work on both of those things with people. And we know that some people are really good at championing vulnerability. When somebody comes on the phone who's more vulnerable, some people are, and all our experience of training suggests this, I'm in my kind of comfortable place. I slow down. I really want to take the time. I had an agent who was working with you in the US recently who said, this is when I know I need to give my real, I won't do the accent because I'm not very good at it. This is when I need to deliver my special care, the extra care. And I've got my hands almost like, you know, metaphoric arms around. We recognize that we need to work together to help them. And some people naturally have that compassion and empathy. They might also be able to relate to that vulnerability in relation to the life that they've led themselves or people they know. But for others of us, it creates this increased pressure, sometimes even irritability, impatience. I don't want to be on this call. I don't really know how to react. They haven't noticed necessarily the person's vulnerable, which is the first challenge. So therefore, they might think that that person who's shouting down the phone or not seeming to follow anything they're saying is just perhaps just challenging and not vulnerable. And that can challenge us. So we really start with really trying to just set the scene around what vulnerability is, get some kind of shared understanding, and then really just try and start to look at the cues and signs and signals, some that might be quite subtle and nuanced, to understand we've got vulnerability with us on the call. And that's our starting point. And then everything else we do comes from there. Yeah, quite a long answer.
No, but I love that, because then in my mind I'm thinking, if I'm a frontline team member, it's quite scientific. Then it's quite scientific. It engages I'm going to engage my listening skills far more than maybe I would have done, because I'm looking for those clues. And
it's like that's the one thing to remember, that to your point, if you're a frontline team member and potentially you're not one of Sophia's kind of natural vulnerability superstars, you know, you don't, for whatever reason, have that naturally empathetic response yet. The good news is with all EQ competencies, they are buildable, coachable skills, and that with, you know, with practice and with a bit of knowledge and good coaching, we can all get better at this. So these are superpowers that we can develop and hone. And it's really important to know that we might be, you know, a young frontline agent that doesn't have that frame of reference or that life experience to understand what someone's going through. And that doesn't mean that we're not, you know, we're not caring individuals. It means that we simply don't know what we don't know quite yet. So that's what we can do. It's about raising awareness, noticing, then becoming super familiar with all of the signs of vulnerability and you know, really understanding the topic. So it's not just enough to know about vulnerability, you have to know what to do about vulnerability once you've identified it. And the good news is it's totally trainable and coachable. So, well, I say totally. Blanket statement.
I think you said that you gain a superpower by the end of this. So,
I know there's somebody on this call who's got a superpower, and it's not me. But anyway.
Nor me. What's the superpower, Sophia?
Oh, I don't know about superpower, but we really know this idea of everybody, every customer wants to be treated like an individual, but our vulnerable customers, we could say that, couldn't we? Our vulnerable customers, we absolutely need to, and one size won't fit all. And if we get this right for our most vulnerable customers, we really hone these skills around listening, around empathy, around questioning effectively and supporting effectively, putting empathy into action, we're going to get it right for all of our customers. So, so what is it? So if we're talking about the superpower, it's that really being able to recognize those signs and then really be able to take the time, just take the time. And it doesn't necessarily mean in the long run, it's longer actually, because we can have a more efficient call when we can really learn to be aligned. It's about alignment, aligning with that customer from their experience and working with them to a solution.
There's something lovely in what you just said, Sophia, around that idea that how we do anything is how we do everything, which I know is Martin's a quote that he favours as well. And there's something, if we can get our response right with our most vulnerable customers and support them, then it just naturally follows that we're going to be doing the right thing by all our customers. And we know, because we've seen it time and time again, that if we get it right, then that has, you know, a whole raft of benefits, both, you know, from a well-being perspective, all the happy, clappy, touchy-feely stuff, but also for the bottom line as well. Because to your earlier point, you know, customers with vulnerabilities can also be extremely loyal if they feel supported. So.
Yeah.
Are you seeing, I'm just thinking about the impact and the course content and that kind of bespoke nature that you bring to this. Are you seeing, in terms of the attendees, that they're at all levels, or is there a particular kind of stratas of the organisation that you're doing more training for? Or
I think the topics are far-reaching, and they, you know, they can touch every element of a contact centre operation, and we naturally offer our services for all people. It just depends where the angles are, your focus and your way in, I think. So it's like just different lenses in on a topic, depending on whether somebody's dealing day in and day out with customers, or whether they are, you know, dealing day in, day out with looking after the people that are looking after our customers, but also having those, you know, kind of those edicts from the powers that be in a contact centre, you know, or whether it is the powers that be even, and how they can be more aware and tailor their approach, and also be more compassionate, etc.
Yeah, and I would say, to add to that, from an internal perspective, we're working very much with frontline agents on this human element, because they're the ones that are relating, you know, on every call. But we'll also want to be working, and are working, with leaders who are responsible, to leaders, etc., supervisors, people at that level, where they really want to make the connection between the learnings that are clearly happening during the workshops, and seeing those changes, and making sure those behaviours are coached in the long term into the business. So I'm sure that we've got that understanding, that we might have raised our level of awareness, maybe even raised our skill set, but how do we make sure, and we utilise coaching for that we make sure that we're keeping consistently, we're making those moves, and we're keeping on making them. Yeah. So we've got that continuous improvement going on. So we've been working at that level as well. It's absolutely crucial. Otherwise, potentially it dilutes some of the learning once it's back to the workplace, rather than actually ramping it up and reinforcing it and using it as a springboard. Yeah.
And there's definitely something in that tailored element around just really understanding why the training is necessary, and what, you know, dynamics are in place at the time before we go in and work with a group of people or separate groups of people. You need real buy-in from all levels to make it work. So for it to be, you know, synergistic, nice business word there, you need that coaching and ongoing feedback cycle to really embed the learnings, and you need people on board. But part of what we do is exploring the why with people, just so it does have meaning and value, and then helping people to own their kind of their plans and their pledges for action when they get back out of the training space and back into their workspace, just so they feel like they own it, and they've got agency and purpose and meaning going forward.
Yeah.
Do you think, just hearing you talk there, and this giving people the superpower of being able to interact with vulnerable customers, and then that washes over to just dealing with customers that are not vulnerable, and raising that kind of customer service level, I'm thinking there must be positive benefits for the attendees of the training just in their life, because it's not like you're not being taught how to do something specific for the job, are you? It's just how you interact with humans. Have you had any kind of feedback for what are your thoughts on that? Am I off the mark there? Or
you're absolutely on the mark, Martin. You know, we know everything happens in the relationship. So then when we develop these skills, we can't help but take them into our other relationships as well. So, and we do expect, we want, don't we, to be a professional. We show up to work as our professional adult, but actually the better we get at being in our adult, working, you know, on this I'm okay, you're okay place, the more we bring that into relationships outside of work and with our co-workers as well. And we've certainly, I mean, we could, you know, I even had quotes of people saying, I wish I'd known this 10 years ago, or this might have saved my marriage, or, I mean, we hear them. We hear them
all.
Yeah,
we hear them all. We've had people, you know, that have gone, those aha moments you speak about, they're just kind of staring, and this was in a bricks and mortar location, just staring at the kind of the whiteboard and the session that we were all having, and just going, this is, I know that this is me and my wife, this is it, this is just those moments of complete, you know, thunderbolt, which it's transferable. It's definitely a transferable skill.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to psychology of communication, I think it's a bit of education on that for all of us can help bring things that those unconscious patterns may, you know, make them conscious. And then once we're more aware, so we raise our self-awareness, and then we can notice, and then we can make choices to do things differently. But it's that awareness piece which sits at is the foundation of that, and that's a lot of what we will do. We try and reach those, bring that into training.
Make new moves and then keep on making them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because I think part of me initially was thinking, this is why you really need team leader buy-in, because when you're at the end of your shift, is it harder to do what you trained into people than at the start, you know? But actually what you're saying is, if this is just if progression and evolving you as a human and how you interact with relationships, then it's less about when that is happening. Don't get me wrong, I know the team leader still has to offer that kind of check-in, support, reminder, help, you know, for people to deliver their best. But it's not like it's a system that they engage, that you've given them the access codes to. It's more about who they are as people in their human interactions.
Yeah, so we, you know, Martin, we talk about the human element all the time, and it's not just hot air. It really isn't. It all starts with the human element. God, I can't actually verbalize it any better than that. And to Sophia's point, everything happens in the relationship, right? Management happens in the relationship, sales happen in the everything, and we recognize that, and we help other people make those connections as well. So yeah, it's not just a switch that you flick and then turn off, and just, you know, it's with you all the time, and it does have many crossovers into other aspects of your life.
Yeah, and if we've all exposed it and we're all working on it, then it can become part of the culture, you know, the way we do things, and it promotes psychological safety in the team as well.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know where I read it, but I'm sure it was recent, about there was a study that psychological safety is probably one of the key elements of high performing teams.
You might have read that in our material. Yeah, it absolutely is. So it was research that Google did initially, I think, and they found that one of the key factors for innovation and insight is psychological safety.
Yeah.
So basically, just paraphrasing exactly what you just said. Yeah, what you
said.
But
with the added note of, it's also part of your training.
Yeah. So that idea that we can then, if we feel that psychological safety, there's benefits for the team, the business, but for the individual, the idea that I can show up, be myself, I feel safe to take a risk, safe to put my ideas forward, safe to flag if I've got concerns. Those things, that's really the starting point of it. So I feel safe enough to do that, and that makes it's going to help my performance. Yeah, safe to be vulnerable, say I'm not okay, all of those things.
And that does all come back to this wider cultural piece and this idea of buy-in, and that, you know, you can't just deliver training one and done and expect endless and boundless huge trajectory of an uptick in performance. There needs to be initial buy-in, there needs to be buy-in from participants, there needs to be, you know, kind of a wider engagement piece from the wider business to really make these things have the impact that we know that they can have and do have. So there's lots of things at play, but sometimes it's just simply having those conversations and letting people understand the why, because we all we fear change, right? So it can be really just important to help people to see what the benefits are, and then go forward with it, and then incorporate that culturally into a coaching culture, or at least a culture of positive feedback and where people feel safe.
Naturally, notwithstanding the great content and all of those great things, why do you think it's been during this period of the pandemic that operational leaders have been more open? I mean, it's just gone bonkers with us in terms of people wanting training for their teams. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I want to say something about, I think there's probably lots of reasons. I think one of them, I think there is something about if we've got this physical distance from each other, how do we create that kind of psychological, what things can we do to promote that psychological proximity? And training is one of the things that we can do, as well as having very regular check-ins, lots of coaching, etc. So I think it is from that point of view, even without all the learning and mastery, it has a place, and it helps to promote this idea that we are a community, and where there are concerns about, are people going to feel isolated? Are they going to are they, because we're physically disconnected from each other, how do we bring people together? So I think first, not necessarily the most important thing, but it really sits there even before we've got going on the learning. And that idea that we can, at times when we don't have control over certain aspects, perhaps even of our business, we feel, certainly what's going on externally to our business, learning we can. So the idea that when we're in a learning situation, we all come out of this stronger. We know from a wellbeing perspective, if we took a look at the 5 ways to wellbeing, that 2 of those, keeping learning and keep connecting, are really key, and both of those things will happen. So we know when we have mastery, we have over something, we learn something, we've got meaning and purpose, it makes us feel good at times when we're perhaps not feeling quite so good, quite in control. So that's a few thoughts from me on that.
Yeah, and again, just to circle back to that, operationally, I think due to the way that people have kind of removed all those, whether they were real or just attitudinal barriers to working from home and to all kind of connecting in, we've been able to flex and offer really nimble solutions. God, it sounds so, solutions, training solutions. We've been able to just say, hey, come and join us for a virtual workshop where we're going to do some real work and really connect, and people have been able to have see the benefit and do that, and potentially they wouldn't have gone for it in 2018 or even 2019, but come 2020 they were saying, yes, sign us up.
That's great. And you must be excited about the first time it's been done, I think, with us, the relationship with the CCMA and delivering training to their members as well. Can you, a shameless plug, I know, but just for the course titles that you're going to be delivering over the next couple of months that are available?
Go
ahead.
Yeah,
we're going to start with vulnerable customers, because we just know it's, we want to get as many people as possible to connect into that topic. We're working with lots of organisations on it at the moment, but I think it's an area we feel really proud, I think, almost to be a part of, because of that duty of care, and because we are, vulnerability is so widespread. So vulnerability, and then leading on from that, we're going to look at emotional intelligence in the contact centre, and really looking at that from all angles, what it's like to lead and manage others, but also how that distills down into that relationship with the customer. But the idea, it starts with that self-awareness we were talking about earlier, and then really learning to regulate and manage ourselves so that we can influence better in the relationship and how we work with others. Helen, I think you're going to be leading on with the quality in the assurance.
quality assurance in the contact centre, because naturally that is also what we do at VPA. So yeah, we'll be happy to impart some practical skills and knowledge in that area, and then managing change in the contact centre as well. So some good solid courses there, which are very much in our wheelhouse. Yeah, exciting.
Well, I feel like I've learned something just from doing this, that kind of how so much is interconnected, and this period of great enforced change can lead to real positive outcomes, notwithstanding it's the tragedy of the pandemic itself, but how it's just shaken everything up, and it's unleashed creativity, and you know, whether that's from born out of necessity or going, we need to find a different way to do this, or to your point about how do we both train our people but also keep them connected, and that kind of the bonds that we have. It's just been great to hear you both talk. I just want to end with really asking you kind of individually the whether there's been a sort of takeaway for you personally through doing this, through kind of interacting across the globe with different people virtually. What's been the kind of your own personal biggest change? Maybe starting with you, Sophia. Oh God.
When you say chance to change, you see, I was just formulating a thought there, and I don't know whether it's about change or more about reinforcement. So you can say
it can be both.
The question, but I think that that's so different, that we are so more alike than we are different, and we have been working across the globe that we are more alike than we are so more alike than we are different, which I already knew. But sometimes we can forget that, and particularly in the times we're in now, we can get very isolated. So that normalizing, and I hear that time and time again with participants. It's so great to hear that I'm not alone here, reinforcing our own view. So that shared collective understanding, that normalizing, that we're all in this together, and we're going through similar challenges. So I love that. I feel really privileged we can work with people across the globe in that way. Remember that it doesn't matter where we are, we're still having a human experience, and that is a really good basis on which we enter into this training community together. So that stands out for me. Yeah, a real chance to grow, I think, in this current climate.
Thank you, Sophia. Helen?
I've been listening to Sophia, it just made me think about the fact that I've been struck by how, well, when I kind of came into the contact center industry, there was a lot of talk about, the robots coming, chatbots, there won't be any more agents, rah, rah, rah. And I think now I've been really surprised that in this kind of like forced push towards, technological advancement and change, which has been fab, there's almost been a kind of more of an acknowledgement, more than I've ever seen, of the importance of the human element. I keep saying it, but what it, the kind of what used to be called soft skills, quite derogatory, in quite a derogatory way almost. It was just like a checkbox on a scorecard where they soft skills. Now there's a real understanding that this is the differentiator in terms of, organizational success, and it's the key to well-being. It's the key to happy customers, and it's kind of so linked and enmeshed with customer experience that I'd love to see this new kind of like refreshed appetite for the human side of things, and how that relates to customer contacts, right? Bit of a waffle there, but
no, I love it. It's as always, it's just enlightening to spend time with you both. So Helen and Sophia, thanks very much for coming on. If you are interested in the training, you can access that through the BPA website, or now the CCMA website. And as always, if you do get the chance, please do subscribe, leave any reviews of Get Out a Wrap. And also, finally, just please do check out the work of Naomi House and Jack's Place. It's a hospice that provides exceptional services for life-limited children with life-limiting afflictions and their families. It's a great space, but it is massively underfunded, not wanting to get political, and dependent on contributions from people. So we have a partner, we're in partnership with them, mainly through my auntie. Make it sound all grandiose, but it's because my auntie works there, and they're bloody amazing. So thank you very much, and Helen and Sophia, thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.